What's going on, all my interns of everything cinema? Today we have a special occasion because we're going to look into an upcoming film which has not been released yet. I know, it's kind of against my code. But anyway, we're going to look into it because its predecessor was a very healthy, structured film, but now its sequel is looking a little bit under the weather. We're going to have to dissect this one and get into it and make sure it's not committing franchise suicide. Now to the guy with the normal voice. Thanksgiving and Rocky movies go together like turkey and stuffing.
Go in the alley and eat the bird!
With the fall winding down and Thanksgiving drawing closer, it's even more fitting when a new Rocky film is up for release. I know that technically these new Creed films are a different narrative, but let's be honest here. The original Creed film, released in 2015, was one of the most surprising entries cinema had to offer in recent years. Standing on the shoulders of the iconic and fittingly ended Rocky series, Creed was a rare example of a spin-off that expanded on the story and even the characters. Narratively speaking, the film showed the ripple effect from the events of the Rocky series and brought them to life in a convincing and ultimately compelling story of a bastard child who seeks his purpose. One of the best films of 2015, Creed was also refreshing in its authenticity, which came from a strong performance by Michael B. Jordan and a gritty, determined vision by the now renowned director, Ryan Coogler. It even brought new life to the character of Rocky Balboa, for which Stallone was criminally snubbed at the Oscars. With the success of Creed in the box office and among critics alike, we all knew a sequel was in the works, and we welcomed it. What has come to fruition, however, is an unnerving and possibly atrocious turn into sequelitis, with the upcoming Creed 2 boasting a bafflingly contrived plot. In anticipation of its release, we'll be looking into this upcoming film, and we'll dissect the narrative issues at hand, and perhaps how it can succeed in the face of franchise suicide. First, it can at least be recognized that it doesn't look all bad here. The first thing to commend the filmmakers for is taking their time with the sequel. 3 years serves as a good bridge to further develop the characters and how their circumstances have changed in the years since the first film. Some good ingredients are here, including Adonis's newly established family life, something that should be highlighted in contrast to his youth as a troubled bastard child in the juvenile system. Additionally, we have Rocky's place in this whole story, which may also be interesting. Not only is Rocky in the aftermath of dealing with his illness from the previous film, but he's seeing demons from decades ago coming back to haunt him. This is a particularly interesting plotline that can hopefully be addressed well enough to have Rocky's arc be as interesting and compelling as that of Adonis. Also, the internal dilemma that Adonis is slated to battle will be fascinating to see unfold as he faces one of his own demons. As promising as those elements may be, they come at the expense of an immensely ludicrous plot. Perhaps the most lethal symptom from which the upcoming film suffers, the plot is simply lazy and unbelievably contrived. Some people even balked at the concept of the original Creed film, the long-lost son of Apollo Creed finding his place in the boxing world. A fair skepticism there, but this new film calls for nothing but skepticism. Most of us could accept the somewhat plausible setup of the first film, but here, it's unforgiving in its absurdity. The ending of the first Creed film left the possibilities virtually endless for how to continue the story of these characters, and the route taken by the filmmakers is to exploit a cartoonish 1980s caricature that was Ivan Drago, and serve more as a sequel to Rocky IV than Creed itself. Now, there are a lot of reasons to love Rocky IV, mostly for its status as an aesthetic time capsule for 1980s idiosyncrasies. Obviously, this new film isn't aiming for that innate campiness and absurdity that ever so highlighted the 1985 picture. They're trying to keep that grittiness going from its predecessor, and trying to mesh these completely different entities is going to call for a Herculean effort to effectively pull off. Let's dig a little deeper here. In Creed 2, we see the resurgence of Ivan Drago, who has groomed his son to be a boxer as well. They formally challenge Adonis Creed to a revenge bout over 30 years in the making. This provides Adonis the chance for the revenge of Ivan Drago killing his father, Apollo, in the ring in their 1985 exhibition fight. This also gives Drago a chance at vicarious revenge, achieving possible victory after being disgraced by a defeat at the hands of Rocky. One of the many problems is that Rocky IV already was a revenge story. The whole second half of the movie is Rocky stubbornly bludgeoning himself with the purpose of avenging Apollo's death, even though there's really nothing to gain from it other than temporary brain damage. Tapping in on the concept of poisonous revenge is nothing new in cinema, and to see such a cliche brought to a series that had an earnest revival is a little disheartening. That seeming lack of earnestness is another problem that hovers over this sequel. The Rocky series is debatably not remembered for how it started. What began as a compelling look into the good-hearted everyman of post-Vietnam America turned into an episodic Saturday morning cartoon. Don't get me wrong, the sequels were immensely entertaining, but as the series progressed, they became gradually superficial and silly. Even Stallone's bodily transformation throughout the years is a perfect parallel to where the series went, plastic and artificial. Rocky V tried to revert back to basics, but had mixed results. It even took 16 years before Rocky Balboa was released and channeled that emotional energy that was lacking in the few previous entries. The point is, the new Creed film is playing with fire in that same vein. Rather than taking the series into unfamiliar territory, it's gambling on the marketability of a rematch against a bland, Cold War archetype, and using the revenge cliché to do so. With that as the setup, the question now is, what can be done differently? Since this is the route the filmmakers have decided to take, they're going to need to dish out a couple surprises to achieve similar acclaim as the first entry, and let's take a look at them. Firstly, let's address the plot again. In terms of current events, the new Creed film has the same opportunity to hold a mirror to the world that was done in Rocky IV, though maybe this time we'll have a few less robots. Joking aside, it may be refreshing for the film to take a more apolitical stance than was taken by Rocky IV. Even though there is renewed tension between the US and Russia, today's climate in entertainment has gone so over the top in terms of correlating everything with some kind of political bent. To keep the narrative restrained to these characters and not some grandiose geopolitical commentary would be welcomed in this oversaturated market of activist entertainment. That's not all this film can do differently, though. Secondly, this film has a great opportunity in that it can finally humanize the character of Ivan Drago. Obviously, Drago's son will be a villain here as well, but it goes for the both of them. As much as we love Rocky IV for all its campy fun, Drago was nothing more than a cardboard cutout on which to project the fears of the Cold War. This time around, it would be beyond fascinating to get inside his head and understand what the character has gone through. Personally, I would love to see a sympathetic angle to the Drago characters and what trials they might have gone through as pawns of the failed Soviet agenda. There could be a lot of trauma there that could be explored and maybe even serve as a parallel to that of Adonis Creed. Given Stallone wrote this sequel and he effectively humanized the opponent in Rocky Balboa, I'll admit he's more than capable of making this happen. This will only happen, however, if they approach this movie with the same earnestness that I've mentioned from the predecessor. Knowing we can't recapture that same 1980s style campy fun, digging deeper into the Drago character will be an opportunity massively lost if not taken by this film. Lastly, let's talk the visual aspect here. Creed was a notable accomplishment in many aspects, and one of which was its impressive technical prowess. Using a modest budget in minimalist style, Ryan Coogler put forth a gritty, stimulating, and engaging visual dimension to the film that stood out from most procedural dramas. Perhaps the crowning achievement was the extensive one-take that captures the entirety of a round in which Adonis is bludgeoned in the ring. This kind of visual artistry will be essential in carving out this series' own aesthetic identity and elevate it to an even higher art form. So while the lunk types will love the sight of punches being traded, film buffs will also be attracted to the technique by which the camera tells the story. Remember, film is a visual medium, and Coogler knew that approaching the first entry with a distinct visual style that would be a key to its success. While the film could very well bring these potential elements to life, the prognosis is still 50-50 for me. Creed II has been getting off marketing itself as primarily a bombastic follow-up to Rocky IV, and secondly, a character piece. While that could just be the savvy of the studio heads, it doesn't offer the same element of surprise that was brought to us with the first Creed movie. We don't want a film in the vein of some overblown crapfest like Southpaw. We like to see the everymen of America, the flawed characters like Adonis Creed or Rocky Balboa, who can be found anywhere, be it in a Philadelphia deli or a cubicle in Los Angeles. We like stories about real people. Luckily, with Coogler serving as executive producer, and with Stallone's genuine enthusiasm, some consistency may be upheld. It is dependent, however, on this team of filmmakers to understand and deliver on something that subverts the cliches and deviates from the norms. Though they have one foot in the door of franchise suicide, they can still come out of this triumphant. We can only hope so. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you liked this video and you would like to keep your healthy dose of cinematic education up to date, please consider subscribing. Get the discussion going in the comments and we'll take it from there. Better conversations mean better movies.